Welcome to Awesome Movie Year, the podcast where we take a look back at an awesome year for movies, which is every year. I'm Josh Bell, film critic and writer, and I'm joined by my co-host.
Jason Harris. Know what I mean? Comedian. Know what I mean? Filmmaker. Know what I mean? And know what I mean? Know what I mean?
I don't know what you mean. I don't know any. I never know what you mean.
Well, you should ask my friend Vern.
Yeah. So this season of Awesome Movie Year is our 20th season, and we have been looking back at various years that we have covered in the past, and we are here at 1987 for Jason's final pick of 3 picks. And what is that, Jason?
It's a classic film that's probably registered with the Library of Congress at this point, the National Film Registry. It's called Ernest Goes to Camp.
It sure is. And, you know, this is Jason's pick, but I suppose we shouldn't be surprised that our producer Dave is the one really
who is
the Ernest super fan and has really put in, I think, far more effort in terms of watching movies than any of us have put in for really any episode that we have ever done. Dave, we have to give you credit for watching 10 Ernest movies this past week.
If we're counting Dr. Otto as an Ernest movie, which I think we should, 10 movies. Yeah.
all the accolades, all the live shows. This is what makes it all worth it, Dave.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you could tell that I've been waiting for this opportunity. I just, I kept putting it on the back burner. I wanted to revisit the Ernest movies for years and years, and I just kept not doing it. And Jason, thank you for making this your pick.
I was surprised after seeing your 10 watches that you didn't have an Ernest movie in the draft anywhere. Like, did it just elude you or?
Yeah, I don't know. And like, actually, when you mentioned it, it wasn't even like, because you made a big, it was like fanfare when you said Ernest Goes to Camp, and like Josh was like, oh no. And like, it hadn't even crossed my mind that was a movie that was in one of the years. So yeah, it totally just eluded me that was one of them.
I was delighted by, if you were like, how do you write an 80s movie? This one really checks off all the tropes of like a summer camp movie. So along with the entire Ernest situation and revisiting Ernest, I was really glad that like we got our montages with the crappy soft rock songs. We got the bad guys and the kids have to work together to save the summer camp. All the things you could want from an 80s movie right here.
All the things except for quality.
Nope. Josh, you're in the minority here. Sorry, it's not an obscure movie from 1953, but Ernest, you're going to just have to go with the populists on this one.
I don't think so. So Ernest is, if you are not aware, a character played by actor Jim Varney, co-created, or I guess fully created by John Cherry, who is the director and co-writer of this film and the director of virtually every Ernest film subsequently from this as well. And he's an advertising wizard, really, the Don Draper of the 1980s, who invented this character of the kind of Southern accented, fast talking, annoying neighbor who talks to his neighbor Vern and tells him about various businesses and products as part of commercials. And what to me was really impressive, and I think even after all these years I hadn't realized about Ernest, is that I remember growing up in Southern California, Ernest being the spokesperson in commercials for Cerritos Auto Square, this big conglomeration of car dealerships. And I think I just always assumed Ernest was the Cerritos Auto Square commercials guy and was very popular. And that's in LA where all the movie studios are based. And they then made a movie out of Ernest, the Cerritos Auto Square guy. But what it was is that John Cherry's agency would license Ernest, the character, to different businesses in local markets. And before the existence of the internet, you wouldn't know, just like I didn't know living in Southern California that in a different market, Ernest was the spokesperson for some other business, for a car dealership or a restaurant or various other entities. So I found this fascinating. And I think this is really the reason why Ernest was able to become a film franchise, is because not just people in Southern California, but across the country knew him and loved him as the spokesperson for their local thing. So
to that point, Josh, Disney CEO Michael Eisner and executive Jeffrey Katzenberg were attending the Indianapolis 500 and were impressed with the reception that Jim Varney as Ernest had over Mickey Mouse during the parade. And that's why they decided, hey, make a movie with this guy.
Yeah, and I definitely was more amused, I think, and entertained by Ernest as a kid than I was by Mickey Mouse, probably, who didn't. Now, I don't know what he was doing during this period of time, but nothing that I watched. And I will say that I'm sure I've seen this movie before. I'm sure I watched this movie as a kid, but watching the movie didn't jog any memories for me. But when I went to YouTube and I plugged in Ernest Cerritos Auto Square and I brought up some of those old commercials, immediately I remembered like all the lines. So yeah, it stuck with me. Dave, did Ernest advertise anything where you were growing up?
I don't remember specifically, but as I was like kind of watching some clips on YouTube and stuff like that, a lot of it kind of was coming back to me. And I don't know if it's stuff from the show, stuff from actual commercials, some of the bigger, once he was doing like Sprite and stuff like that, or was it 7-Up, whichever it was. But like, some of the sodas and things like that. I do remember seeing Ernest commercials though.
Yeah. Jason, did you have any Ernest commercials in New Jersey?
I'm pretty sure we must have, he was all over the place. And Josh, I do take exception to you calling him the annoying neighbor. He's the beloved neighbor, Josh, is what you meant to say.
I mean, I think regardless of what you think of Ernest as a character, the concept is that Vern is annoyed by Ernest, right? I feel like this is central to the concept of Ernest. So I don't think it's inaccurate for me to say that he is Vern's annoying neighbor. But he did graduate to films. He first appeared, as Dave was sort of alluding to, as one of many characters played by Jim Varney in the sort of sketch comedy-esque movie, I think we could say, Dr. Otto and the Riddle of the Gloom Beam, before debuting as the star of Ernest Goes to Camp. And is that accurate, Dave? Is that sort of like a sketch movie?
Well, it's more just all over the place. It's very scattered, but it's not necessarily a sketch movie, though. It does have like a whole through line. It just goes in all kinds of directions.
Okay, and Dave was a fan.
I liked it. It was as good as pretty much any of these movies, honestly.
Yeah, and how much Ernest is in that movie?
Well, there's not much Ernest at all, except for at the very beginning. But you do see like the old lady character, and he's doing more characters and more bits, and he's great in it.
Yeah, and that is like Ernest Goes to Camp, and all the subsequent Ernest movies are for kids, but that's not really a kids movie, right?
Sure, yeah, that's way too weird. I think it would freak a kid out.
So Ernest Goes to Camp was a hit. They were correct in guessing that Ernest would be able to translate to film. The movie grossed $23.5 million on its $3.5 million budget. It is the third highest grossing Ernest movie, so Ernest's success continued. I believe it's the next two after this that grossed more. So that was sort of the heyday of Ernest. That was his high point. It was not beloved by everyone, though. It did receive a Razzie nomination for Jim Varney as Worst New Star.
Yet again, showing the ridiculousness of the Razzies here.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. I mean,
he carries the movie, Josh. He's Ernest.
He does. And as much as I was annoyed by this movie and by Ernest, Jim Varney certainly throws himself into the role. And as he did in those commercials, you can see, and especially in the commercials, which are only 30 seconds long, he just has like maximum energy the entire time. And supposedly, according to, Wikipedia, because of that business model where he was just advertising so many different local businesses, he would run through like dozens of different versions of the same ad and would easily be able to remember every little talking point for various different businesses and just churn these things out. So yes, props to Jim Varney for being so dedicated and such a workhorse.
There you go. Now you're being sensible. So, unlike the Razzies, like, you don't like the movie, that's fine. But Jim Varney is a tour de force. I think we can all agree.
Well, that's
tour de force,
taking a bit far, but
singular performer.
He is certainly giving it his all, and I did not like the movie. Nor did critics, for the most part. Karen James in the New York Times said, Mr. Cherry has come up with a kiddie film set in summer camp, cleverly aiming his campaign to market Ernest at an audience of unsuspecting children. Minimal plot, cartoon characters, instant movie. The movie is really about sight gags. How many times can Ernest mug at the camera or get attacked by animals and insects? There have been worse ideas for innocuous summer films, but not many worse executions. The slapstick is tame and predictable. The characters and their inspirational message are served up as neatly, there's no avoiding this, as if they were in commercials. It's such a pesky film, now I know how poor Vern feels.
Poor Werner Herzog, maybe. He should make a new Ernest movie, if you ask me.
That would be maybe a documentary about the horrors of Ernest by Werner Herzog. That would be something to see.
I mean, whatever you wet blanket, if you don't want to go to camp and enjoy the ride with Ernest, then I can't, if you don't want to have fun, that's your problem.
There's no fun to be had in this movie, as far as I was concerned.
You're just as big as a wet blanket as that lady you just read, Josh.
I mean, sure, but it's a bad movie. It's a very bad movie.
Josh, if I had a bouillabaisse slingshot right now, I would drench you with assorted shellfish.
It's more like a cannon.
A cannon,
really.
It's like a wood chipper or something.
Right? Yeah, it is like a wood chipper. You put stuff in, and then the goop comes out. So. Yeah. Joanna Steinmetz in the Chicago Tribune said, "Never let it be said that Ernest P. Worrell doesn't get the last laugh in his first feature film. Trouble is, that laugh comes midway through the opening credits, as Ernest falls backward off a ladder. It's the first of many pratfalls in a movie that strings together misadventures at such a frenetic pace and with such disregard for character development that it recalls the Keystone Cops of early cinema. Most of the problem with this movie is that Ernest is too much of a cartoon to carry such exposure, particularly since he hogs most of the scenes. Only the zany chef, a John Candy type given to bizarre recipes like graham cracker bouillabaisse, and his accomplice compete for screen time, and they are fugitives from yet more cherry-directed commercials. The other characters, even the children, behave like cardboard props."
So, right, you've read 2 reviews from 2 female reviewers who don't like the movies, right? Is that what we're at right now?
Yeah, so are you going to make a sexist comment about Ernest only being understandable to men or something?
No, I was going to do the opposite, say they're being sexist against Ernest, Josh.
Sure, that's really the reasonable conclusion to draw there.
Yeah. See, Josh, you tried to throw it on me, but the sexism is the other way. You're just all over the place today, buddy. What? You woke up on the wrong side of the Ernest bed.
The bunk bed.
Yeah. I was not familiar with commercials featuring the chef and his sidekick. Were you guys, have you seen those at all?
No, I figured that was probably it. Those characters are worthless, but I do hope that we talk about how they might be lovers, because I got those gay undertones that you love to find from those two. So.
I didn't think about that, but why not? Anything to make this more interesting. So, Dave, were you familiar with those guys at all?
No, not really. Not like from outside of the world of the movies, so no. Yeah.
All right. So, Jason, Hal Hinson in the Washington Post was slightly more sympathetic.
He said,
I don't know how this has become a sexist idea here, but Hal Hinson said, "Although the film is little more than a slapstick showcase for the nosy neighbor character Varney has played in TV commercials, it's not the slapped-together piece of work you might expect. John Cherry, who created the Ernest character and directed Varney in his commercials, and served as director and co-writer here, has some sense of how to set up a gag on screen, and he's got a feel for how to draw on his performer's strengths. As a result, the movie is fairly inoffensive, and younger kids may get a real boost out of its us against the world spirit."
See, making kids feel good, teaching them lessons about not giving up.
There are no good lessons to be learned from this film. Like, even if you enjoyed it, it is not offering a coherent moral lesson of any kind.
If an evil, magnate of business tries to take over your summer camp, the lesson is band together and blow up everything that they have, light them all on fire. That's a clear lesson that this movie gives, Josh.
Not a lesson that anyone wanted or needed to learn. And calling this fairly inoffensive is about the highest praise that anyone can offer. I could not find Siskel and Ebert, whether they reviewed this. Roger Ebert did not write a review of this or any Ernest film, as far as I could tell. And his archive is pretty exhaustive. The TV segments are sometimes hard to find, but his written reviews are all there. And so he somehow had the instinct to never, ever watch an Ernest movie. And good for him.
Well, because clearly he's letting the art speak for itself, and I respect that. What needs to be said that isn't already said on the screen?
That is not at all true. So, Jason, I assume you saw this and loved it as a kid, and that's probably why you thought of it for us to talk about.
I just, we're doing a draft. Let's go take some shots. You know what I mean? So, and I saw it as a kid, and I think I liked it, but then obviously you start liking it a little more ironically. I don't know if you remember this, in high schools, how they have different spirit days, like, dress in pajamas day, or, gender bender day, which, I don't know if you could do that one anymore, but we had dress as a movie character day, and I went as Ernest. Do you remember that, Josh?
Oh, I sure do.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and that was very amusing. I'm sure I was impressed with your cleverness dressing up as Ernest, and that was probably not something that anyone else would have thought of. And appreciating Jason in his Ernest costume, I think, is the limit of my amusement with Ernest at this point. But I absolutely remember that. Yeah, I didn't remember I thought it was for Halloween rather than a spirit day, but I definitely remember you in that costume.
Yeah, you might be right. I don't know. I just remember throwing it together. And the fact that I had a denim vest at the house really, made the whole thing pop.
And and I remember too recognizing it immediately, even if I hadn't watched any Ernest things at that point, still probably a number of years, even when we were in high school, it was clearly, that guy. So yeah. I do, of course, remember, as I said, those Cerritos Auto Square commercials. I've never been to Cerritos Auto Square, but I don't think I could name a single other car dealership in Southern California. And I'm sure I saw this too, because I was amused by those commercials, and it was a big hit, and it was aimed at kids. And it didn't jog any memories for me, like I said, but I'm sure I saw at least a couple other Ernest movies. Dave, I did remember something when you wrote your Letterboxd review of Ernest Goes to Jail, and there's some bit in there about Ernest being like magnetized.
Yeah.
That immediately I was like, oh, I remember that. So I'm sure I saw that one, and I imagine I must have seen the Christmas
Ernest
one.
Saves Christmas, yeah. I think the first few we probably saw all of.
Yeah, of course, yeah. But I don't think I was a fan. I'm sure I enjoyed them when I was little, and then the enjoyment kind of faded, but it wasn't something from my childhood like the Ninja Turtles or something that I can look back on and remember like, oh, I love this so much, even if I kind of think it's dumb now. But it just kind of passed me by. But Dave, you must have had a real love for Ernest as a child.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, first of all, we might have mentioned this in passing while talking about Wet Hot American Summer, but I went to Jew camp every summer for like 7 years in a row. And so this was like an official movie for all of us at Jew camp. We all loved this movie and quoted it and, reenacted things constantly. So it was like an absolute favorite at the time. I haven't seen any Ernest movie in at least 15 years at this point, up until I did this marathon. The only two that I don't think I had seen was Ernest Goes to Africa and Ernest in the Army. Although some of Ernest Goes to Africa was kind of jogging my memory. So I might have watched it just on a whim one day at some point. But yeah, I hadn't seen any of these in years and years, but I used to love them, of course, back in the day.
And last week when we were discussing how to watch this film, Dave immediately turned behind him to his giant wall of DVDs and grabbed multiple Ernest DVDs off the shelf.
Sure, absolutely.
That's how I watched this one.
Yep.
Yeah, and props to Dave for that. Because yes, for some reason, and we will maybe talk about this later, what that reason could potentially be, unlike every other Ernest movie, Ernest Goes to Camp is very difficult to watch. It is not streaming or digitally sold or rented at all. And the DVD and Blu-ray releases of it are long out of print. So Dave had the resources there to make that happen. So,
like Ernest himself, he's a resourceful guy. When you give him an obstacle, he will find a way to overcome it.
And then fall down.
And then fall down. I was going to say it hit my head or something.
I did. I counted in the first half hour. I was keeping count of like how many times he fell. And I think I got to like 6 in the first half hour. And I was a little disappointed that it tailed off from there until act 3. I was like, dude, if we can get to 20 falls in this movie, I'm all for it. So
maybe the Ernest drinking game would involve taking a shot every time Ernest falls down, perhaps.
Or says, know what I mean.
Yeah. Oh, then you'd be dead, I think, probably. So anything else you want to say about the background of this film, Jason?
Well, I mean, like you were saying, he was already a commodity, you know? So in 1985, he hosted Happy New Year America. Actually, no, that was hosted by Chris Christopherson and Johnny Cash, but he performed on that in 1985. In 89, I watched a clip of him in, I just watched this yesterday on Comic Relief because Vern is actually there, and he's, Vern is into BDSM in that one, which is interesting.
Who played Vern on Comic Relief?
Doug, I think his name was Doug Cox. He's another comic, but
okay.
Yeah. So, but he had already had a bunch of specials. Hey Vern, it's my family album. Hey Vern, win $10,000. Do you know about this one in 1987? Or just count on having fun. A compilation of Ernest commercials. The VHS includes a sweepstakes in which viewers who correctly counted the total mentions of the word Vern and know what I mean in the video and submitted their answer before April 1st, 1988, would be entered into a random drawing to win $10,000, Josh.
And the fact that people would buy a VHS tape full of Ernest commercials, I think really just shows you how popular, like you would go and buy a VHS tape of ads. Like, I don't know any other entity that, you know, character or commercial that could have fueled something like that.
Yeah, well, as we know, Ernest is his, you know, you can't really categorize him, Josh. He transcends boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, we'll come back and talk some more of our general thoughts on Ernest Goes to Camp. Welcome back to Awesome Movie Year. In this episode of our special retrospective season, we are back in 1987 to talk about Jason's pick, Ernest Goes to Camp. And Jason, you picked this, it sounds like more for the entertainment value potentially of, or the variety of doing an episode on a movie like this than as much of your fandom of it, but you liked it watching it this time.
I did. You know, yeah, it's like one of those like wacky nostalgia things that's really of a time, you know, and I was watching it with my daughter, and the first few minutes, she's like, "Why are you showing this to me?" And we got through about the first half hour before she wanted to go to bed, but she said, "Can we watch the rest of this tomorrow?" So she was all in within the first half hour, and I was all in. It was charming and delightful, and like I said, I don't dispute the flaws of the movie. Character development for the kids, things like when the white kids light the tent on fire and then they get no reprimanding for it, you know. I mean, I'm sure you're going to talk about Mr. Cody there, the Native American in it. But all that said, what a fun time. It was just like summer camp, Dave. Mm-hmm. You know, I don't know, Dave, if you got your first kiss at that Jew camp, but this felt like that first kiss all over again.
Okay. Oh, yeah. No, nobody kissing. They cut a romantic subplot between Ernest and the Native American nurse, which was probably the right call. I don't know.
I mean, you could feel the tension though between those two, right?
I guess. Does Ernest ever like fall in love and have romance in any of the later films?
Yeah, he does start to like want women, and there's some weird stuff going on in some of the older ones, but the later
horny
ones.
Ernest, or, I don't know if we want to see that. I mean, it's better to leave it out.
That's the new franchise. Ernest makes a porno.
Yeah,
Ernest starts an OnlyFans.
Let's not go there. So, and Dave, you love Ernest. You loved this. I mean, I know from reading Letterboxd that you enjoyed your journey through the Ernest films again this time.
Absolutely. And like Jason was saying, I mean, this is just a good-natured, silly summer camp movie. And like, it's kind of in the vein of like, you know, Meatballs and all that kind of stuff, except for kids. And so why not make a movie like this? And I get it that Ernest himself is an acquired taste, shall we say. But like, if you are on the speed of like watching this guy just be a complete idiot and, you know, all the kind of things that he does, it's a fun time.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird. Like, I would say that maybe Ernest is not an acquired taste because people were watching him for 30 seconds and immediately remembering him being entertained by him, wanting to see him again. I mean, how often, even at a time when you couldn't fast forward through the commercials on TV, how often are people watching commercials as they're half paying attention and waiting for their show to come back and thinking, I want to see more of that. I want to see that guy again. I think he's not. That there was this built-in audience because right away, and I think watching those commercials, I could tell that it's like a much more concentrated dose of Ernest, but it's more, I found at least more entertaining to watch him for those 30 seconds, not just because he's annoying and I don't want to watch him for more than 30 seconds, which is true, but also because he delivers more comedy, more energy in those 30 seconds than he does across the entire 90 minutes of this movie. So I don't know that he's an acquired taste. I feel like you watch a 30-second Ernest commercial and either you're laughing and like, oh, I want to see that guy do more stuff, or you're not.
And most people wanted to see him do more stuff, Josh.
Yes.
And
a lot of people did,
and they kept wanting to see him do more stuff. That's why
for a little while.
Dave watched
for a little while.
No, come on, 10 movies. Come on, man.
Well, right, but I mean, 9 Ernest movies, and then also Dr. Otto. But as you know, as we can talk about, the success of those movies peaked quickly and then fell off just as quickly.
3 hits, you know. That's as good as the Lord of the Rings, bro.
Yeah, that's true.
Yes, there's Jason's quote, Ernest movies as good as the Lord of the Rings.
I'd rather rewatch these than the Lord of the Rings. So, yeah, I'd say those first 4 were very popular, not counting Dr. Otto. The first 4 Ernest movies were very popular. And then Ernest Rides Again, which is my favorite, by the way. We'll talk about that later. But
yeah, Dave's ranking of the Ernest movies.
Yeah, we'll talk about that later. But that's when he started to fall off. And then we start getting into the direct-to-video and all that stuff.
Wait, why is that? If that's when he started to fall off, why is that your favorite?
No, I mean, it fall off in the public.
Wise.
Yeah, public perception.
Yeah, but from a pure, you know, artistic standpoint, that's
right.
A crescendo, a height. So.
Oh, it's so
and the
good.
Ernest movies are all about art, right?
Yeah.
The movies created by an ad agency based on a character from a commercial are all about art.
I mean, Josh, in a way, you got to look at, like, you know, how many other movies can you think of that were created based off of commercial characters, right? Like,
well, yeah, I was thinking about that. And movie-wise, I don't think there is that much. But I mean, fairly recently on TV, we have the example of Ted Lasso, which is a huge hit and beloved by many people and critically acclaimed, unlike the Ernest movies. Yeah. So it does happen.
Clear
it's
blueprint
rare.
Right there. You
Yeah.
know, Ted Lasso followed the blueprint, but
I wonder if I don't recall any interviews where they asked any of the Ted Lasso people about their inspiration from the Ernest movies.
I'm just saying there was no Lucky Vamos Diet Coke movie or anything like that. So give Ernest his love. You know, the Micro Machine Man, he could have maybe had a movie back in the day. It'd have been very short because he finished all his lines within a minute. But that's
he could have read the whole script into a 130-second commercial, and that would have been something. So come on, though, Jason. There's a lot of bad stuff here, even if you enjoyed this.
Yeah, you're right.
Thank you.
I can't deny that. And that said, like, I think, you know, I'm a sucker for the classic 80s movies, and it did see the classic beats through of, like, you know, summer camp, Under Siege, conflict between the campers. We got to band together and save the camp. And like I said, montages with the shitty rock songs we don't ever hear anymore. And yeah, I could have used a little more romance with Ernest and Nurse St. Cloud, but otherwise, you know, I really it was just fun. I just had fun watching it. So.
You wanted to see the romance for Ernest.
Oh yeah,
Jason's got an Ernest fetish. He's putting on the denim vest late at night in the bedroom.
Ernest's safe word is know what I mean.
Well, that's going to be bad for Ernest because then the session is going to end right away.
Nothing happens.
He can't avoid saying that. That's not the right one for him.
Josh, I thought about you when Ernest sang.
Yes.
Oh my God, that's so bad. It's so bad.
I wrote that in my Letterboxd review.
Not only is the song terrible, but Jim Varney, I mean, I'm with you when you're saying he's committed to this role. He's a good actor in that he's fully embodying this character. He's not a good singer.
I thought he was fine as a singer. It's, you know, more personality but yeah, the song, it's just like, man, I would just love to be watching this with you right now.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And it's also, even if you liked the song, it's so incongruous that all of a sudden, is this a musical? Why is Ernest singing this like plaintive ballad about how sad he is? Which is, there's no comedy in that scene whatsoever. It is straight up, it is Ernest about how sad Ernest is, and like the campers who talk about like nothing characters. We get no character development whatsoever about these kids who are supposedly juvenile delinquents. I mean, this is the plot, that Ernest is the handyman and all he wants in life is to be a camp counselor. And he gets the chance when the camp takes on these kids from like, who've been imprisoned, and they're getting their second chance. And no information about what they've maybe done to land themselves in prison. But
no, that's not true. They introduce all the characters
with vague descriptions.
Yeah.
Not
this
anything.
This guy's a thief. It runs in his family. This guy does this. Come on.
Yeah, but we don't get, I think also, if like you're going to say, oh, this is like a classic summer camp movie and it's a thing for kids, the kids are an afterthought in this film. All of them. They do nothing. They just kind of stand around.
And that was a smart decision because Ernest really shines here. You want to watch more of those kids just bebopping around, Josh? Come on.
No, they're shitty characters, but at the same time, like the movie isn't making any attempt to make them interesting characters.
Well, it's not called The Kids Go to Camp, is it, Josh?
No, it's not. But I think for a kid's movie, you would imagine that maybe the kid characters would have some presence of some kind.
You would think so. But that's yet again showing just how unconventional Ernest is taking these tropes and spitting them on their heads. Josh.
Well, you heard the Disney statement. This guy is more enjoyable than Mickey Mouse, so that's why we're here to watch him.
Yeah, you're kind of making.
I don't think it was that he was more enjoyable. He was more popular than Mickey Mouse at a monster truck rally or
no, the Indianapolis 500, man.
Okay,
like the biggest sporting event in auto racing that there is in this country. So
yeah,
but I think Ernest would have done really well at a monster truck.
I think so. I think so. But that, Jason, you're mentioning all these songs, and so not only the song that Ernest himself sings, but all of these kind of soft, rocky songs, which we don't recognize, are all originals. They were all, I looked in the credits, all of them are written by like the composer of this movie. So they didn't license. It's not like Hot Rod licensing the work of Europe or whatever. They just, and I think that goes to the ad background, right? If you're going to write a jingle for your ad in the style of some popular music, you have people who will just do that for you. Why license somebody's real song when you can write something that sounds like it? And that's what we have in this movie as well.
Yeah, they were very crafty. Obviously you had mentioned they're a Nashville-based agency, I think, and this was all shot in Tennessee. So talk about maximizing your returns here, Josh.
Right.
Yet again, you're showing what an amazing project this is.
No, and I can give credit to John Cherry, who was the head of this ad agency, for doing, as we've said, something that no one else done. And I think even when you look at characters like Ted Lasso, who did go on to some level of success beyond their commercials, they have the backing of big corporations. Ted Lasso was from NBC, I believe, NBC Sports Commercials, or one of the major networks. But this is just a little ad agency in Nashville taking their character that they created and turning him into like a box office sensation in a movie released by Disney. So certainly impressive that they
outside of the Hollywood, kind of LA scene. These guys are just in little Nashville trying to make it, and they broke through.
They did. Yeah, I mean, and I would have to think that even now, if you are in advertising, this has got to be a pretty amazing success story that would be held up as we could all aim for, creating something so iconic that it becomes a film franchise outside of being a commercial.
When Dave teaches his course on Ernest at College of Southern Nevada, I feel like these are points that are relevant to the course.
Dave's going to get a PhD in Ernest studies.
Ernestology?
Ernestology, yes. Yes, absolutely. Indeed he is. So can we talk about the representation of Native Americans in this film?
Yeah, go ahead. You start and then I'll jump in here.
Yeah, well, I mean, I was wondering about your daughter because I know she's very attuned to this kind of thing, and it opens with basically you could tweak the plot of this film a tiny amount and it would be a horror movie, because it is about a camp that is built on not a Native American burial ground, but a former like sacred ritual site. And it opens with this supposed sacred ritual that these natives, I don't think they ever name a specific tribe, the fictional made up tribe used to do on this land. And it's a very stereotypical depiction of Native Americans. And then later on, we see in the modern day that Nurse St. Cloud and her grandfather, played by Iron Eyes Cody, are the last survivors, I guess, is the idea of this tribe, this unnamed tribe. And they therefore have the land, and the evil developer wants to take it from them, wants them to sell it. And it is partly the fact that presumably the filmmakers didn't know at the time, and nobody knew at the time, that Iron Eyes Cody, who is a very, very famous Native American actor for decades, including that iconic Don't Litter commercial where he is the shedding one tear at the people mistreating the land and littering, was an Italian American guy, just a white guy who clearly capitalized on something that worked for him and dedicated himself so much to it that he like reshaped his entire life. He's the Rachel Dolezal of this era, pretending to be Native American.
Another trailblazer.
Trailblazer. That's one way to put it.
No, you're right. You're right. And you know, again, I mean, I don't think, look, you can fault the filmmakers for whatever the writing and the scenes were, but you can't fault them for casting this guy because, like you said, he was playing Native Americans for over 30 years, right? Like all the way, I have the pale face with Bob Hope and everything. And you mentioned the commercial. And his sister was like, yeah, we're not Native American. We're Sicilian or Italian American. And he refused to acknowledge that. So, you know, he, Iron Eyes Cody probably has played more Native Americans than, I don't know if he ever played anything else but a Native American.
Right. I mean, it seems like something where maybe he was cast in one of these parts early in his career and he realized that this was a way for him to consistently get work, especially probably in like the 40s and 50s when they were making so many Westerns. And he just doubled and tripled down on it. And you're right. He was certainly a prominent, maybe even the most prominent Native American actor at this time. And they cast him. And this was actually his final film role. He died not long afterwards. But
this is what's called going out on top.
Yeah, it sure is. But I mean, even if that is true, I mean, obviously the depiction of Native American culture here is very stereotypical, and the campers undergo, you know, they take on these projects where they build a teepee, or they mention one of the groups in the past made a headdress. I mean, every stereotype that you could imagine. And I also wondered about the language that Iron Eyes Cody's character speaks, because he never speaks English in this entire film. The whole idea is that he only speaks their language. But since it was a made up tribe, I wondered, is he just speaking gibberish? And I'm not 100% sure about that. But given his background as an actor, as a person, I wouldn't surprise me if he was.
Or maybe he's just, you know, such a method actor that he learned different tribal languages. The thing, Josh, though he doesn't speak English, as long as you speak English and you use sign language when you do it, he can understand that. So.
Yeah, there's some, but this tribe, apparently, this is not a thing that I'm aware of as being a Native American tradition, but this tribe apparently had their own sign language. And because Ernest knows it, this is actually a problem, right? Because Ernest knows the tribe's sign language and he interprets for the evil developer, and he gets hoodwinked, and he thus sort of tricks the old grandfather into signing away the land, which creates the problem for the climax.
The all is lost moment, if you will.
That's good writing, honestly.
Yeah, you got to take them all the way down before you bring them back up. And then Act 3, you know, first they have to stop, you know, the Crater Inc. developers. Then they have to stop Crater himself. It just keeps escalating and escalating, Josh. And
it does.
It's a roller coaster.
These kids commit so many crimes. As they should all be like, they've already been arrested and convicted. They should have their sentences.
Look at Josh taking the side of big business, right?
No,
he doesn't seem to care that, like, as you said, they were bamboozled and hoodwinked and tricked into signing this document. So,
and Nurse St. Cloud says, we need to get a lawyer, and she does. While the kids are busy like murdering people, she goes and gets the attempts seem to go pretty well, I think. There's a lot of explosions in close proximity to human beings in this film.
Hey, eat the rich, baby. Come on, man.
Yeah. But Nurse St. Cloud manages to go off screen and get a judge to sign a restraining order, preventing the developers from destroying this land. And of course, yes, they're evil. And they make Crater, the main guy, played by John Vernon, who's known for playing these kind of characters. People remember him from Animal House.
Teen Wormer.
Yes, exactly. And he goes beyond. Like, he's not just, hey, I have this document and I'm going to, mine for whatever it is. I don't know. Is that a real element that they're trying to mine for? I don't
think so.
Yeah. But, so whatever, unobtainium that he's trying to get from the summer camp. But at a certain point, he's like, no, I'm going to take my rifle and I'm going to murder these children. And his lawyer, the lawyer character, is like the voice of reason in this movie. He's like, I think you're going too far here, sir. Yeah. But no, he's just going to straight up shoot them. And then,
I mean, he just really tried to shoot Ernest, if we're going to be honest here.
But I think he would have shot the children too. I think at that point he was willing to shoot anyone.
But the bullets couldn't hit Ernest, so can we all agree clearly an influence on The Matrix? I mean, this is all, cinema history we're talking about here.
Yeah, Ernest has, this goes to the mystical depiction of Native Americans, because the reason that Ernest cannot be hit by bullets is because he's now achieved the inner something or other that the ancient Native Americans were trying to achieve in their ritual, and thus they could not, when they did this, they could not be hit by arrows or rocks or something, and so Ernest now cannot be hit by bullets, and this is his self-actualization moment, and he just stands there, but he doesn't know at first that he's invincible, so he really just allows himself to potentially be murdered. He's going to martyr himself for this camp until he realizes.
What a hero, protecting the camp, they're not getting this camp. He says it twice.
Yeah.
He's willing to put his life on the line. Clearly, Josh, all the values of America are encapsulated in this film, right?
Yeah.
Don't take my land. That's a big one.
Don't take the land that we took from Native Americans.
Yeah. Well, I mean, honestly, as you mentioned, it's still the Native Americans' land. They're just letting them use the camp.
Yeah, I don't know how. I have to wonder about Camp Kikiki itself and how well the old grandfather there understood the deal to put the camp there.
He loved the campers. He helped them get ready for the war.
He loved putting them to work, sending them into battle to possibly get horrifically injured.
Yeah, but he this was a way to honor the ancestors, Josh.
Sure it was.
So I think you've really misinterpreted this film, Josh, is what I'm getting to. But Ernest had a dream, and his dream was to be a camp counselor, and he got it, and he wasn't going to let anyone take it away from him.
That is true. That was his dream in this film until he has a dream of doing other things in other films. But Jason, do you want to talk about the chef and his assistant?
That comedy fell very flat. But I do think, had they made out, it would have been great. But like you said, they have this what I would describe as a wood chipper, and they just yell at each other, and or one guy yells and the other guy's like, uh-huh. And he's just yelling stuff bouillabaisse or whatever, and they're just putting random things in. And what they do well is, if a joke doesn't work the first time, Josh, just go back to it enough times till it does. And they just keep going back to it over and over again. But, again, speaking of the craftsmanship of this film, that wood chipper is used to help beat the bad guys. So all of these, little kind of nuggets pay off in the end, much like the Ernest has for his janitorial services, a little cart that he drives around on that just self-drives everywhere. And you think hey, that's a hilarious runner. We love it. It's hilarious. Show it 8 more times. I'm good with that. But then what they do instead is they use it to help blow up the bad guys. So it all comes back in the end. It's Chekhov's gun. You show it in Act 1, you use it in Act 3. This is classic structure right here.
Yeah, except this is, you show it in Act 1, and then you show it again in Act 1, and then you show it a few more times in Act 1, and then show it a bunch of times in Act 2.
Yeah, you're right. They're escalating what Chekhov had already built again.
Yeah.
Making our points for us.
Yeah. So true. But Yeah, I mean, even as a food preparation machine, that thing is not very good because you throw all the foods in and it mixes them up into some sort of goop and then it shoots them out with very low accuracy. So the assistant is always holding like a plate or a bowl or something to catch the food, and it doesn't end up in the thing. It's not a very good system for making food.
But yet a hilarious comedy on the state of summer camp food, as Dave can tell you, going to quote unquote Jew camp for 7 years in a row. Summer camp not known for good food. In fact, I have a friend who's a chef who used to be a chef at Serendipity 3 out here. His whole business now is going into summer camps and making their food better. Shout out to our guy Michael Wolf. But I remember when I was like 9 or 10, my uncle was like a Boy Scout troop leader. So I went to like Boy Scout survival camp, and there was an older Black woman named Peggy who was the chef, and she could mess you up. And the word on the street was if you complained to her about her cooking, she would stuff you in a garbage can.
I'm sure that was not true. But I will say I also appreciated some of the low budget ingenuity of this film because as one of those reviews mentions, Ernest is always getting kind of mauled by various animals. And we see the turtles. He has a tiny little turtle that like bites him on the nose and also turns out to be key to attacking the bad guys in the final act. Yeah. They have a bunch of other turtles and they fix them with parachutes.
Where did they get these turtles, I wonder?
Yeah, and where did they get turtle-sized parachutes? I don't know. And then they fling them, the poor turtles, they fling them at the bad guys and they bite the bad guys. But other than the turtles, there are times when, especially there was a moment and Ernest is like, oh, look, it's a badger. You don't want to ever, pester the badger. And there's no badger. We didn't have a budget for a badger, so it's just off screen. And I did kind of appreciate the ridiculousness of that they're like, no, we're going to have him get attacked by a badger and we don't need to show it. We're just going to show his reaction to it. And Jim Varney is obviously up for that. I mean, his whole thing is reacting to things that aren't there, talking to Vern, who you never see. So can he react to a badger? Of course he can.
Yeah, it's like that bit in Austin Powers where Mike Myers is like walking down the steps or going down the elevator, and he's just behind a couch doing physical comedy. I mean, we could just talk about all the classic films this film has influenced. And, it's a gift that keeps on giving to cinema, Josh.
Yeah, I think we can wrap this up. Dave, did you have any other Ernest related thoughts that you want to share about this one?
I mean, we haven't actually name checked Eggs Erroneous, so I mean, it's kind of important. So
yeah, that is the goop that the chefs are creating that turns out to be very flammable. Yeah. I guess, and they use it as part of the attack on the bad guys. Yeah.
I also like that all the high fives were that classic. Give me some skin from the 80s where you high five a kid or a person, and then you put your hand down, and then he high fives you, and you just do that reverse high five. Like, man, that's good stuff, right?
Good
there,
times, man. Absolutely. Jason, you should have Eggs Erroneous at a Eat This comedy event.
Yeah, we should do an Ernest theme.
Put some
Eat This comedy right there.
Put some modeling clay in that. I think is what the secret ingredient turned out to be,
among other things.
Yeah. So should we rate this out of 5? Know what it means?
Yeah, let's do it. I gave it 3 know what I means, but those 3 know what I means get 5 know what I means for being so enjoyable.
Okay. I'm rating this 1.5.
Oh my God, what an idiot.
It's a bad, I'm sorry, it's a bad movie. And I feel like unless you have this nostalgic affection for Ernest, which I do have related to those commercials.
Clearly you don't.
There's nothing here. There's nothing here. So
who hurt you, Josh?
Yeah.
Who hurt you? Why can't you experience joy?
It's a shame.
What happened here?
How would you rate this film, Dave?
3.5 know what it means.
All right. And this is not, we'll get into this, but this is not your number one Ernest film.
Not my number one, but it's a good one.
Where does this rank though?
It is it's number 4. So it's pretty high.
That's fantastic. That means, Josh, we can watch 3 more Ernest movies that ascend to even greater heights than this one.
Well, you can do that. We'll come back and talk about the legacy of Ernest Goes to Camp. Welcome back to Awesome Movie Year. In this episode of our retrospective anniversary season, we're talking about Ernest Goes to Camp from 1987. And as we said, Dave, super dedicated to this episode and watched all the Ernest movies. So do you want to give us your ranking? There were 8 more Ernest movies after this through 1998. And as we said, they did have big success initially at the box office, and then they kind of dropped off, and the last few were straight to video, and also toward the end of Jim Varney's life, where I think his health was kind of failing, sadly.
Mm-hmm.
But how would you rank the Ernest films?
All right, here we go. So we've got number 1 is Ernest Rides Again from 1993. We got number 2 is Ernest Goes to Jail from 1990. We got number 3, Ernest Saves Christmas, 1988. Then number 4 is Ernest Goes to Camp, 87, of course. Number 5 is Ernest Goes to School, 1994. Then we got Ernest Scared Stupid as number 6. That's 91. Ernest Goes to Africa, which, Josh, you should never watch. 1997. And then we got number 8 is Slam Dunk Ernest from 95. And then, unfortunately, the final Ernest movie is also the worst one. It's the only one I didn't enjoy at all, really. That's Ernest in the Army from 1998.
And where would Dr. Otto rank among those films, you think?
It would be right around 4 or 5, like right in the middle. So, yeah.
Should Josh not watch Ernest Goes to Africa because it reflects so well on the culture that he wouldn't be able to handle it? Is that what we're getting at here?
Yeah, let's go with that. Sure.
Yeah. So in addition to all those films, as Jason mentioned, there was right after this an Ernest Saturday morning TV show in 1988 called Hey Vern, It's Ernest, which I probably watched that as well because I was really into Saturday morning TV when I was a kid. But that only lasted for 1 season. It seems like that would be a good vehicle for Ernest, maybe even more so than the movies, because he could do little short bursts like he did in the commercials. But I guess it didn't catch on quite as much as the movies did.
Well, I think people just wanted so much Ernest that 22 minutes was not enough for them in one burst. Josh, out of these scrapped Ernest movies, which would be your pick to see? In 1997, Ernest films were reported to be in development. Now, which one would you guys want to see? Would you want to see Ernest Spaced Out? Would you want to see Ernest the Bellhop, Ernest in Paradise, or the obvious choice, Ernest and the Voodoo Cursor?
Oh, man. Just in case we didn't have enough racial insensitivity. I mean, obviously, Ernest in Space is the one that they should have made.
Yeah, that would have been fun. Although, of course, I'd watch all of those. So
yeah. Coke Sam's the co-writer of this, and I think probably all the Ernest movies on Ernest and the Voodoo Cursor. Said, so we had Voodoo and a High Priest. It was like an idiot version of Raiders of the Lost Ark. We had lines of zombies, voodoo potions, and Ernest pretending to be a zombie. Man, that's got everything.
Yeah,
that sounds great. By the way, Coke Sam's directed Ernest Goes to School, but otherwise, John Cherry directed all the rest of them.
Yeah, but Coke Sam's was also part of this ad agency, and I think he co-wrote this film, and I think he probably co-wrote all of the other Ernest films, or most of the other Ernest films, with John Cherry. They were both, working together in that agency. And Ernest
Cardin and Cherry is the name of that, I should just say.
There you go. Yeah, and Ernest, even with all of his film success, also continued doing TV commercials through the 1990s. I mean, again, looking on YouTube, I found a Ernest commercial from like 1999. Right again at the end of Jim Varney's life. So he was working his ass off as Ernest for his entire life.
Yeah, some of the things I had read, you had mentioned he could just pop and just get right, turn on the light and I'll get it. So, imagine how much money he's making every day just by doing these, right? But when this film was first proposed, he was worried about getting typecast as Ernest, and thankfully that didn't happen to him.
No, not at all. Yeah, that was a good thing for him to worry about. I mean, he did play other characters and other roles, but I feel like his most high-profile non-Ernest stuff is playing, an Ernest-like character. Obviously, seeing him in the Ernest movies is the reason that he was cast as Jed Clampett in the Beverly Hillbillies movie,
where he sings again.
Oh, thank goodness. Oh, nice. And I mean, and other than that, I think the thing that people most remember him for is doing a voice in the early Toy Story movies. And even that character has that kind of hillbilly inflection and attitude as the slinky dog in those movies.
You're right. But, towards the end of his career, he did get to take on some other work there. So he played a role as an incestuous, abusive father in a film called 100 Proof, which he got good notices for. And he was also in a Billy Bob Thornton movie, which he also got good, reviews on. So It's unfortunate that he died so young. We know he had lung cancer and was a chronic smoker, right? So maybe we would have seen some other things from him had he lived longer.
Yeah, I mean, he died at age 50 in 2000, so certainly young. And he won the Razzie, or he was nominated for the Razzie, but he did also win an Emmy for the Ernest TV show. So that's something that he accomplished. And the Ernest character, this is what I was thinking about. Like, could you reboot Ernest? And I guess there was a brief effort to reboot him in commercials as an animated version with a different voice actor in 2005. And just recently, someone has crowdfunded an Ernest graphic novel, which is set to be released in December 2025. But Dave, as the Ernestologist, who do you think could play Ernest? If John Cherry, well, John Cherry's dead, I think, but if John Cherry's agency wanted to reboot Ernest for 2025, who would they cast as Ernest?
It's such a difficult question. I mean, I feel like the meme answer is John Cena, but like it's a really difficult thing to pull off, though. You've got to be super, super annoying and ridiculous, and you also have to be talented. Because I mean, like we said, even if you don't like these movies, he is good at what he does.
It's got to be a comedian like a Dusty Slay. Who's the new, kind of Larry the Cable Guy? That's how you do it, Josh.
I was thinking just it came to me as you were mentioning Jim Varney's other roles, Billy Bob Thornton.
Yeah, that's a good pick. I think Paul Walter Hauser, it would be.
That's I feel like that's more likely, but I'm just imagining, because Billy Bob Thornton is not young, and I am imagining like grizzled old Ernest played by Billy Bob Thornton. Ernest goes to a retirement home. Come on.
I'd watch that. Hell yeah.
Damn it, Vern. Get it together. John Heder, maybe. He would be a good Ernest.
I feel like his moment is kind of past, but he definitely has that quality as well. So,
but Josh, I wanted to say, you were talking about, the advertising side of this. There was a comedic paperback book called Hey Vern. It's the Ernest P Worrell Book of Knowledge. And then there was another book, Ask Ernest, What, When, Where, Why, Who Cares? And they also had a talking doll. So these guys really made moves with Ernest.
Yeah, I'm sure you could have bought like a pre-made Ernest Halloween costume for your costume if you had done it in 1987.
Yeah, I made mine homemade though. So
yeah.
No.
I already said how impressed I was with your Ernest costume.
Thank you. As of 2022, director Dave Pagano and Ernest Goes to Camp cast member Daniel Butler are planning to release a documentary about Varney called The Importance of Being Ernest.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, it seems like the kind of thing that now, especially, there's, I'm sure, a lot of nostalgic affection for this movie and for Ernest in general, and that something would come back up. John Cherry, as I said, has passed away, but he continued to work successfully in advertising. And outside of Ernest, one thing that he directed that I found fascinating, because Ernest is clearly the heir to this kind of comedy, is that he attempted to reboot Laurel and Hardy with a film starring Bronson Pinchot and Gaylord Sartain, who is one of the actors in this film. And I have not watched this, but...
is that the larger chef, my guess would be?
I think so, yeah. He was one of the sort of repertory players that this advertising agency used in a lot of stuff. And I mean, Dave, you're the slapstick comedy guy. Do you feel like, can you reboot, like, just like we said, can you reboot Ernest? Can you reboot Laurel and Hardy?
Yeah, I don't know that you can, although I guess we're about to find out if, the Lonely Island guys can with the Naked Gun, right?
Right, yeah. I mean, it seems like, especially because Laurel and Hardy are real people, but, I mean, certainly there's that whole tradition, we joke about Dave's love of the Ritz brothers, but Ernest would probably fit right in with the Ritz brothers, wouldn't he?
Yep, definitely.
That movie was, like you said, for love of Mummy. He also directed a film called Pirates of the Plane, which I think is an animated film.
Yeah, and Coke Sam's, the other main collaborator on the Ernest character, he made a movie called Existo, which is about another character that I think showed up in these various projects that they worked on, a magician, some kind of weird magician. And he shifted later in his career to produce faith-based films. So I could definitely see Ernest Loves Jesus as an appropriation of the, like, it's a very middle America heartland kind of character, right? It's not that hard to see Ernest being co-opted for a faith-based film, even though that didn't happen.
So I was impressed because, we see a lot of movies with kids and they don't go on to do anything or, whatever. There are a lot of these kid actors who have had successful careers, Josh. Scott Menville, who played Crutchfield, is a voice actor in Teen Titans Go. And I affectionately remember him as Wart on The Wonder Years. He was also Dwayne Kimmy Gibbler's boyfriend on Full House. Jacob Vargas was in Get Shorty, Mi Vida Loca, Kimmy, and Heaven is for Real. So you're going to that faith-based stuff right there. Hakeem Abdul Samad, who played Mustafa Moose, was also in Wildcats. He was the voice of Franklin in This Is America, Charlie Brown. And he was in a New Jack Swing group called Sons of Light.
Sure. Well,
I'm not done yet. There's two more.
Oh,
Chip
okay.
Osgood, played by Todd Lloyd. Josh, he's a director, a theater teacher. And Richard Spate Jr., who played Brooks, has been on shows like Jericho and Band of Brothers.
Would you know who any of those characters were simply by their names that you read out to me?
Well, I know who Moose is. And, that's an easy one. And Vargas. Basically, all the non-white characters.
Right, exactly. The ones that were ethnic stereotypes, you recall. That's good. Well, Moose, I think, was right. The whole deal with Moose was that he was like the runt, right? He was the one that the other delinquents picked on. Why he was in...
But they didn't ever pick on him.
Right, exactly. They introduced that idea when he first shows up, and you think there's going to be some arc about him standing up for himself or them accepting him or something like that. No, nothing like that at all. I remember
they had more important things to worry about, like saving the camp. Is this not computing?
Yeah, no, clearly the camp that they did not want to go to, they really wanted to save it. I remember Lyle Alzado, and I was trying to remember why. He was a football player.
I bet I know why you remember him, Josh, because you said you loved Saturday morning cartoons. And did you watch Learning the Ropes? Was that why? Because that was on Saturday mornings, where it was a Saturday morning sitcom where he was a single dad who was a wrestler.
That might have been it. I think I must have looked over the fact that was a Saturday morning sitcom, because it's possible that was it. It's also possible because I saw he made a guest appearance on a Super Mario Brothers show, and it's possible I just was confusing him with Captain Lou Albano, who played Mario. But either way, I mean, the guy had a sad life, right? He took steroids his whole life, and he died of a brain tumor at age 43. But for a while, he was kind of this go-to goofy tough guy in a bunch of things like the role that he plays in this film.
Yeah, that was sad. I mean, I remember when that was happening and how he spoke out against it, and how, it was a sad situation. He did win a Super Bowl with the Raiders in Super Bowl 18, and I was a fan of Learning the Ropes back then, Josh.
Okay, yeah, well, maybe I was too then. I don't know. I mean, when I saw his name in the opening credits, I thought, oh, there's a guy I know. And then when he showed up on screen, I felt like I recognized him. But then looking through his credits, I wasn't exactly sure why that was, but that could have been the reason. As we said about Iron Eyes Cody, this was his final role, and he eventually was kind of revealed for his true background. Like Jason mentioned, his sister seemingly led that charge. And an article that I read speculated that one of the reasons, or perhaps the central reason, that this film is unavailable is because it's owned by Disney. As we said, this and I think several early Ernest movies were released by Touchstone Pictures, owned by Disney, and that one of the people that Iron Eyes Cody duped most extensively was Walt Disney himself, and they became friends, and it was all based on his identity. And so that there's maybe some sort of grudge that the Disney company continues to hold against Iron Eyes Cody, and thus makes this film unavailable. This was just total rampant speculation on the part of the person who wrote this article, but that is their justification for why this movie is impossible to watch.
Well, between that and Ernest being more popular than Mickey Mouse, Disney has some heat with Ernest.
But they own later Ernest movies, and all of those movies are easily streamable in multiple different places. So it's really just this one.
Yeah, because money, Josh.
Someone should make a movie about that, by the way. Iron Eye, befriending Disney and then kind of taking him for money or whatever. That would be a great movie.
A fun subplot to Once Upon a Time in Hollywood Part 2 or something like that.
Sure.
So.
Yeah. I mean, I think you're right though, Dave, that the fact that he spent so long, he really is the forerunner of so many of these scammers that we get TV shows about now. You would think somebody would pick up on that, but maybe they will in the future.
Yeah.
John Vernon, Josh, who you mentioned as Dean Wormer in Animal House, playing Sherman Crater here, was also the mayor in Dirty Harry and Fletcher in The Outlaw Josie Wales, a well-known and revered character actor.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's the one that people are most likely to recognize here if you watch this. I mean, aside from Ernest, of course, if you watch this as a modern viewer. So I feel like we've really extensively gone through the whole Ernest world here.
We should say we've mentioned Galliard Sartain a bunch of times, but he had some, real, meaty roles there. He played the Big Bopper in Buddy Holly story. That's a meaty role, Josh. He was in Ali. He was in the Hollywood Nights. Meat, baby.
Sure. But again, he
was on Hee Haw.
And several of these actors, including Jim Varney, really built their careers on these John Cherry projects and the commercials and all that.
So this was great. I'm glad we could do this.
Yeah,
Dave, that's you're a hero. You're a king among men, Dave.
I think now, Dave, we're going to expect you to watch 10 related movies for every episode that we do in the future.
I'm wondering if there's any chance my Letterboxd year in review at the end of the year has anyone except Jim Varney and John Cherry at the top of it.
That's exciting.
I think you need to at some point during this year embark on a project to watch a lot of some famous auteurs' films so that you can counterbalance that.
No way. Keep going down this road, bro.
So that is Ernest Goes to Camp, and that is this episode of Awesome Movie Year. You can tell us what you mean online and on social media.
We're at awesomemovieyear.com, Awesome Movie Year on Facebook and Instagram, Awesome Movie Pod on, a platform that's definitely not owned by an evil, corrupt rich man. So that's great there. I'm Jason Harris Comedy, or Jay Harris Comedy on all the things. I looked up Dave's Letterboxd reviews because I'm on Letterboxd as Go for Jason, and I enjoyed them. And Josh, come see me at Jimmy Kimmel's Comedy Club, and I'll talk to you about Ernest.
Are you gonna put your Ernest outfit on for one of your comedy shows?
Unlikely.
Yeah, that's fair. You can find some mostly old stuff from me at joshbellhateseverything.com. I'm at Josh Bell Hates Everything on Facebook, at Signal Bleed on Blue Sky, and on Letterboxd. And if you're on Letterboxd and you watch this film or any of the movies we talk about on the show, tag your review Awesome Movie Year. We would love to know what you think. And listen to our producer David Rosen's awesome podcast, Piecing It Together.
Check out Piecing It Together wherever you listen to podcasts. Follow us on social media at Piecing Pod, and check out my Letterboxd by David Rosen, where you'll find all those Ernest reviews.
Very entertaining to read. I'm with you, Jason. I enjoyed reading Dave's take on all the Ernest films far more than I would actually to watch the Ernest films. So, Jason, what's in our next episode?
Josh, it's your final pick. It's from 1953. It's the French film D'Abeme Chabapate.
Jason, getting ready to insult classic cinema in our next film. It's The Earrings of Madame de from Max Ophüls. Tune in next time for that. Thanks for listening to Awesome Movie Year.
Thank you for listening to Awesome Movie Year. Make sure to follow Awesome Movie Year on Facebook, at Awesome Movie Pod on Twitter, and at Awesome Movie Year on Instagram. And if you like the show, review us and rate us with 5 stars on Apple Podcasts.
An All Points West production, produced by David Rosen in Las Vegas.